Then it is my very great pleasure to officially welcome you all to the very first activity of the Policy Support Facility under the Covenant of Mayors in Europe. I'm Anna Dimitrijevic from the European Commission's Directorate General for Climate Action. And we are very excited to see the launch of this facility, not the least because the subnational and local levels are so crucial to making a success of the green transition, both in terms of mitigation and also perhaps even more so in terms of adaptation. And vice versa, hopefully the policy support facility will bring in much needed tools in a user-friendly form that will help all of those participating in implementing an ambitious transition for the benefit of all living in those locations.
This is Vasilis Latinos representing the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, and particularly working on the new EU Policy Support Facility. This is an extract basically from the new EU strategy on adaptation to climate change, which was adopted by the European Commission in 2021. So the Policy Support Facility is a tailored program to help local and regional authorities move, let's say, from planning to implementation of adaptation action. And to do that, they get tailored support and guidance. Here now at the first one, basically where the cities and regions will learn, let's say, from experts. Then we are moving into like the second module, starting in June and running until April 2023, which looks into exchange with peers, peer-to-peer learning, and technical support. And then we have like the third module running from September 2022 to August 2023 on implementing of adaptation action with support from experts. And then a final module at the end, the last quarter of 2023, which is looking into showcasing the lessons learned, the outcomes from the policy support facility, and basically bringing these lessons to a wider audience. There are 12 member states that have been selected, let's say, as target states. And you see here, Bulgaria, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Spain, which means that actually, if your city or region is in one of these member states, it would be in your interest to learn more about the facility and also the upcoming activities.
So what are the ingredients that we need for climate action? The European Union has proposed the Green Deal, sketching a climate neutral, resource efficient and fair transformation. We have now adopted, the member states have adopted the European climate law, which requires climate neutrality by 2050, and we have also agreed on midterm targets of emissions reductions of at least 55% by 2030. A whole host of legislations and policies have been put forward and also harmonized with financing options from the adaptation strategy to the Recovery and Resilience Facility under the Next Generation EU, the multi-annual financial framework, the actions that the EIB is doing, etc. Of course, the renewed commitments under the Covenant of Mayors, and very importantly, climate action by European citizens, corporations, local authorities are absolutely key as well. And for this, we have proposed the European Climate Pact, about which I will also say a few words. More systemic adaptation, fostering local, individual, and just resilience So here, the policy support facility is one of the actions under the adaptation strategy. And again, this is one of the many reasons why we are really happy to see it unfold its wings and take off now under the Covenant of Mayors.
I would like to share my presentation and start my session on the funding opportunities for cities and region with respect to resilience. Now I would like to take a look at the two missions we also have seen before, the cities missions, 100 climate neutral cities and smart cities by 2030. And the second mission, which also has been highlighted, the climate mission, is 100 and with its goal of 150 plus EU regions and communities to become climate resilient by 2030. First, I would like to mention the LIFE program. It's the Program for Environment and Climate Action. It has a dedicated sub-program for climate mitigation and adaptation, and it manages approximately 900 million euros. And the Slido is the Horizon Europe. It's the EU key funding program for research and innovation, and it's also the one who is funding the funding platform for the 5 missions. So also for the climate adaptation will be mostly funded under Horizon Europe. Finally, there's also the European Structural and Investment Funds. And another opportunity is the Just Transition Mechanism. With the Just Transition Fund, the InvestEU scheme, and the public sector loan funding. And I would like to further highlight also the Connecting Europe facility. It supports the trans-European networks and infrastructure in the sectors of energy, transport, and digitalization. Finally, I would like also to mention if EU funding seems too complex for you, look out for cascade funding opportunities within the EU projects, like becoming a follower region or receive some fundings from actual EU-funded projects.
So before I actually start explaining the new adaptation advisory initiative, I will briefly start with an overview slide of which EIB financing instruments are actually available specifically to cities and regions. The standard EIB financing instrument is a so-called investment loan, which is financing one single large investment project. In contrast to that, we also offer so-called framework loans, which is a more flexible instrument, which finances actually a whole investment program, which consists of a series of smaller sub-projects. EIB, as many other multinational development banks, also offer so-called intermediated loans. So that are loans to financial intermediaries like banks or leasing companies. And these banks can then on-lend the EIB funds to final beneficiaries. In most cases, these are SMEs and mid-cap companies, but it can also be extended, of course, to municipalities or to other public sector entities. And the last category, which I will not go into any detail, are more complex instruments, such like investment funds and financial instruments, which we also offer. EIB will actually significantly increase its adaptation financing to support, first of all, the EU adaptation strategy. When we finance adaptation projects, we will focus on key investment areas, as shown on these slides. As you can see, adaptation in cities and regions are actually one of the key priorities of EIB. And we will focus our adaptation financing, but also our advisory services actually on those projects which can offer the highest potential for reducing climate vulnerability, for building climate resilience. And as you can see here, this may include interventions such as flood management, coastal protection, of course, climate resilient cities, but also protection of different infrastructure networks, or things like nature-based solution, which gain actually in importance in these days.
EBRD's Green Cities is the dedicated program supporting the cities to reach their environmental ambitions. A city must be located in one of the EBRD's countries of operations. Usually, we look for cities with a population of with a higher population than 100,000, but we can go down to 50,000 in certain circumstances. The city needs to commit to develop a Green City Action Plan together with EBRD's support. They need to initiate a so-called trigger infrastructure project in one of the municipal sectors, and each project, whether it's trigger project or a follow-on project, must target a 20% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, energy or resources consumption, or have significant climate resilience benefits. The program has significant public outreach, as you can see from these pictures. Our program has a key feature, which is stakeholder engagement. Basically, throughout the preparation of the Green City Action Plan, we have 4 or 5 stakeholder workshops at key milestones to ensure that the population, the interested public, is involved in the decision-making process. I would conclude by saying that cities have a key role to deliver climate and development benefits in very different areas like adaptation, mitigation, jobs, livelihoods, growth, inclusion, health, and well-being, a lot of areas that they are responsible for. EBRD, like other IFIs and the EU, also play a vital role in ensuring that sustainable investment delivers these benefits in our countries of operations.
So basically, it's a very interesting. We talked a lot about financing, and also what it's actually out there in the EU policy landscape and how we can actually link this to financing. It's good to have actually both banks here to this session. Maybe if I can ask more general question, and maybe to all the panelists. So you presented a lot of your financial instruments and incentives, and of course we are now cities and regions are in quite an interesting, of course, phase now, with also in a, let's say, post-COVID, living with COVID area. How can actually these financial instruments and incentives can be combined, let's say, to promote also a green recovery, but also like healthy, sustainable lifestyles? So what are the options, let's say, for a starting city or region to invest in adaptation and resilience? And where would this city, let's say, start? And maybe I will ask the colleagues from European Investment Bank on this. So let's say if we don't like really look into like the big cities out there, that they are more engaged in finding adaptation funding, but more like starting cities.
I mean, we look at each city when they approach us individually, and together with them we would review where they currently stand, what kind of local adaptation strategies they might have already developed at city level. Maybe something is existing, maybe something is not existing. In principle, we can even support cities at an early stage where they might not have yet a fully elaborated adaptation strategy, and we can really help them with developing this. But not only developing a strategy, but also developing or early on in the process, identify individual investment projects in different subsectors. And to help them really create also an investment pipeline. Because I think looking at adaptation, this is one of the main challenges, is how to really translate, the EU and national policies and targets on adaptation into concrete investment projects at the local level. I think that's really the key. And this is actually where we want to provide an added value through our ADAPT advisory to really, take cities who are willing to develop meaningful adaptation and resilience projects, but really help them to take a strategic look and help them to develop a pipeline and help them to identify suitable funding sources.
Thank you. Just wanted to add to this point that in the missions, there's actually a target and the objective to reach particularly vulnerable regions and communities and cities. So that may overlap with what you were asking about. Cities that are starting out rather than being more advanced along their journey. And there is money available in the missions as well. The idea is that this money is used also to leverage other sources of funding, especially for the completion of the later stages of the projects. But I wanted to also flag this up. And one way to get involved there is to sign the Charter of the Mission of Adaptation, which is again available via the links already provided, which does not entail any kind of commitment other than to engage. And that way you've taken a step to enter the community of practice and will receive more support via the missions platform for implementation as well.
There is also like a question. Do you want to maybe unmute yourself and ask this?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
So yes, basically at Epicenter, we are working in other PSF projects in Europe. And my question is generally to all of the panelists to see what are the opportunities to collaborate in creating this community that you were mentioning that you are developing for the implementation of the programs and the different initiatives.
So depending on the hats that you're wearing when asking this question, I would recall that the Climate Pact is also available to people active in the research community, research institutions, for example. So that may also be something that you wish to explore in order to join these communities.